the new world heavyweight champion from Benton, Texas, Kerry Von Erich.
Kerry Jean Atkinson was born February 3, 1960, in Niagara Falls, New York. Kerry was the fourth of 6 sons born to Jack and Doris Atkinson, though New York is not the first state that springs to mind when someone mentions Kerry or his family. Kerry's father, Jack, was better known as Fritz Von Erich, one of the biggest stars in professional wrestling, and at the time of Kerry's birth, one of the biggest draws at the gate. Even though Fritz and Doris were originally from Texas, Fritz was wrestling primarily in the Northeast United States and Canada. The timing of Kerry's birth was significant, coming just 11 months after the Atkinsons' oldest son, Jack Jr., died in an accident at the family home in New York. In a sense, Kerry replaced Jack, which likely played a huge part in the open secret that Kerry was Fritz's favorite. As older brother Kevin would say years later, every family has their favorite child, but not everybody knows who the favorite is. We all knew it was Kerry. Wanting to get them away from the heartbreaking memory of losing their first son, Fritz made the decision to move the family back to his home state of Texas, where both his and Doris's family still lived. That way Kerry, Doris, Kevin, and another brother David would all have someone close by while he traveled the country as a main event wrestler. In 1964, Kerry's younger brother Mike was born, and in 1969, Chris was the last brother born to the family. During that time, Fritz teamed with Ed McLemore to buy out the Dallas-Fort Worth wrestling office, breaking away from the Houston office managed by Paul Bosch. By 1969, Fritz became sole owner of the territory after McLemore passed away. It was a series of events that shaped the mold not only for Kerry's future, but the future of his brothers. Despite the fact that their father was one of the most famous pro wrestlers working at the time, the Atkinson boys all had a fairly typical upbringing in North Texas, with the exception of getting into some fights at school because Fritz also happened to be one of the most hated heels in the industry. Fritz corrected that when he turned babyface in the late 1960s, further shaping the future for Kerry and his brothers. All of the Atkinson boys were good athletes, excelling in various sports in high school. While Kerry played other sports like football, track and field is where he garnered the most attention, setting the 4A high school record, throwing the discus 195.7 feet his junior year at Lake Dallas High School. That mark has since been passed a couple of times, but Kerry is still ranked third on the all-time list. By the time Kerry was breaking records with the discus, both Kevin and David had started wrestling in their father's promotion, taking the name Von Erich. Kerry would not quite be done with track and field once he was out of high school, earning a scholarship in both track and football at the University of Houston. However, the impressive-looking 18-year-old Kerry would dip his toe into the pro wrestling waters while still a student. On a part-time basis, Kerry Atkinson became Kerry Von Erich. There are contradicting records about exactly when Kerry's debut match was and who it was against, but Kerry's actual debut took place on July 31, 1978 at Will Rogers Memorial Coliseum in Fort Worth against Gary Hart. Details are hard to find on what led up to that match, but I suspect it was something along the lines of Mike Von Erich's debut against Skandar Akbar a few years later. Hart could have insisted on being Kerry's first opponent, not wanting him to have an easy match. The difference being, Kerry actually lost his debut match to Hart by disqualification, possibly with Fritz interfering. Kerry would pick up his first win 2 weeks later, defeating Killer Tim Brooks at the same location in just over 6 minutes. However, his matches would be sporadic over the next several weeks as he started college in the fall. Kerry would concentrate on track and field his freshman year, and it seemed like the timing couldn't have been better going into the 1980s. Houston track and field coach Tom Tellez was also an assistant for the 1980 U.S. Olympic team, specifically overseeing throwing events like the discus. Thanks to Tellez, Kerry was chosen as an alternate on the 1980 U.S. Olympic team and would have traveled to the games in Moscow, ready to step in if another athlete was injured or fell ill. Unfortunately, it would never happen. On March 21, 1980, with the Summer Games in Moscow just a month away, U.S. President Jimmy Carter officially announced that the United States would boycott the 1980 Games. Almost 500 Olympic athletes, alternates, and coaches would not be going to Moscow. Unlike his older brothers, Kerry's athletic dreams were never going to lead to a pro career. Kerry's dream was to go to the Olympics. Faced with the reality that he would have to wait 4 more years for the opportunity to possibly be part of the 1984 team, and maybe not make it, Kerry left college and returned home. Luckily, having essentially been born into wrestling, he had a job waiting for him. Of course, Kerry had never really left his pro wrestling career behind, he just put it on hold. Since debuting, Kerry wrestled in the summer and on breaks, even playing a part in getting his childhood friend Brian Gower to become a pro wrestler. He would be best remembered as Brian the Diaz. Even before he entered the full-time schedule as a pro wrestler, Kerry had won his first wrestling championship. Kerry tagged with Bruiser Brody to win the Texas Tag Team Championship against Tim Brooks and Mark Lewin on July 23, 1979 in Fort Worth. By the end of 1979, Kerry was appearing somewhat regularly at house shows in Dallas and Fort Worth, and even made his first trips to St. Louis, Mid-South, and Western states. The same natural charisma and incredible physique that turned heads in high school and college quickly made Kerry arguably the most popular of the Von Erichs as he began a more regular schedule in the Dallas territory by the end of March 1980. As the Olympics got underway in Moscow, Kerry was not only appearing in Dallas and Fort Worth, but hitting spot shows in places like Granbury, Texas, and Abilene, Texas. Kerry also made his first appearance on a World Wrestling Federation card, making his Madison Square Garden debut on March 24, 1980, with a victory over Jose Estrada. Kerry was not only drawing the attention of fans in Dallas-Fort Worth, but the National Wrestling Alliance was taking note as well. This encouraged Father Fritz to step things up and push the then 20-year-old Kerry a little faster than his brothers. On July 28, 1980, NWA World Champion Harley Race came into Fort Worth to defend the title against Fritz Von Erich, but many eyes were trained harder on another match. That same night, Race faced Kerry in a special challenge match, thinking he would have an easy time with the kid barely 2 years out of high school. Kerry shocked the fans when he defeated the then 4-time world champion, putting the young Von Erich on par with his brothers and his father when it came to contending for the world title. Race and Fritz would battle to a double countout later in the night, but all the buzz surrounded Kerry. Now that Kerry had made his mark on a national level, it was time to cement it with some local gold. On December 28, 1980 in Dallas, Kevin Von Erich was scheduled to face Gino Hernandez for the vacant American Heavyweight Championship, the top title in the Dallas territory. The title had been held up after a December 20th match between then-champion Hernandez and Kevin, but Kevin had been injured in the match and was not cleared to wrestle in the rematch 8 days later. Kerry would step in and take Kevin's place in the match, upsetting the more experienced Hernandez to win his first singles title. Kerry would get 2 shots at the world title early in 1981, with Race winning a match in Fort Worth and a match at the 1981 Wrestling Star Wars card in Dallas, ending in a double countout. But as the summer of 1981 drew closer, it became apparent that, at least as far as the Von Erichs, it was actually David that had the inside track on getting a world title run. Wanting to keep themselves closer to consideration, Kevin and Kerry appeared in other territories while David held down the fort in Dallas. Kevin spent most of the summer in Georgia, while Kerry spent June and July in Mid-South. Kerry's 1981 Mid-South run didn't provide much as far as feuds, but fans certainly took note of the good-looking kid from Texas. Kerry did defend his American Heavyweight Championship at the 1981 Superdome Extravaganza, defeating the Grappler in 19 minutes. Kerry did briefly tangle with the Samoans, Afa and Sika, and tagged with both Junkyard Dog and Ted DiBiase in attempts to take their Mid-South Tag Team Championship. Both times, Von Erich and his partner came away without the belts. By October, both Kerry and Kevin were back in Dallas, and that December it was David's turn for an extended period away from their home base, with a significant difference. David would not only be gone longer than his brothers, spending the next 7 months in Florida, but he would also be working as a heel. The NWA preferred their champion to be able to work as either the babyface or the heel, and David wanted to prove he could do both. While David was in Florida, Kevin, Kerry, and Fritz continued the ongoing feud with Gary Hartstable in Dallas, with Kerry occasionally traveling to Missouri to get in the mix for the Missouri Heavyweight Championship, considered a stepping stone to the world title at the time. There was also a new world champion in the NWA, as Ric Flair began his first reign in September and came to Texas for 2 defenses against Kerry in January 1982. Flair left with the belt both times. While things were going well and Kerry was standing at the forefront of the rising popularity of pro wrestling in Dallas, there was also something of a lull happening. A bit of spice was added when Von Erich ally Big Daddy Bundy turned on Fritz and aligned himself with Gary Hart, changing his name to King Kong Bundy. But that was still just an extension of the Von Erichs' ongoing feud with Hart. They needed changes and more new blood in the territory. That was coming in spades, but first Kerry and Kevin would get a chance to branch out with David. After defeating King Kong Bundy and Gary Hart in a Texas Death Steel cage match at the March 1982 Wrestling Star Wars card in Fort Worth, Kerry made the first of 2 short trips to Florida to work as a heel alongside David. Kevin would also make appearances at house shows, but only Kerry made an appearance in studio on television. Leading up to a tournament to crown the Florida version of the NWA World Tag Team Champions, Kerry appeared with David in an interview with Gordon Solie. While Kerry was never known for his mic skills, he was good doing a standard 1980s heel promo, bragging about his body and his high-quality possessions. Most world-class fans didn't get to see this Kerry until years later, making it a little odd to see the young man presented as the respectful All-American boy being cocky and braggadocious. David and Kerry even got involved in a conflict with Butch Reed as they aligned themselves with world champion Ric Flair, of all people, coming to Flair's aid when Reed was beating him down in the ring. As for matches, Kerry and David lost to Steve Kern and Mike Graham in the first round of the tag team tournament at Bayfront Center in St. Petersburg on March 27, 1982. Kerry's second venture to Florida just over a month later saw Kerry and David losing to various combinations of Butch Reed, Sweet Brown Sugar, and Barry Windham. That includes a 6-man tag match against all 3, as Kerry and David tagged with recently turned heel Jim Garvin. Returning to Dallas full-time by May, Kerry jumped back into the feud against Gary Hart's stable, heavily centered on King Kong Bundy, who Kerry had lost the American Heavyweight Championship to before his second stint in Florida. It was all to set things up for a huge card at Texas Stadium in June. Feeling that he was leaving things in good hands with his sons, Fritz Von Erich decided to retire from in-ring action. On his way out, he wanted to topple the man who turned on him, King Kong Bundy, and take back the American Heavyweight Championship. For Kerry, that card would also feature one of his biggest matches yet, as he took on Harley Race in a no disqualification match for the number 1 contendership to the NWA World title. All of this was happening just as Mickey Grant was working with Fritz to begin a new weekly TV program that would be shot for Channel 39 in Dallas at the Sportatorium and end up being syndicated across the country. The new show would change the way pro wrestling was presented on television, having handheld cameras around the ring and close-up shots of the wrestlers. It also led to the territory rebranding as World Class Championship Wrestling. The first major card for World Class was the 1982 Star Wars Super Bowl of Wrestling held at Texas Stadium, what would commonly be referred to as the Fritz Von Erich Retirement Show. David returned to tag with Kevin against Kabuki and Magic Dragon for the All-Asian Tag Team Championship, and Fritz would defeat Bundy to regain the American Heavyweight Championship. Kerry's match against Race is considered one of the best matches for either wrestler in the time period. The youth and agility of Von Erich forced Race to work smarter, catching Kerry in a small package early to get a near pin. When Race attempted a classic falling headbutt, he wound up falling right into a Kerry Von Erich iron claw. Race broke the claw hold by pulling Kerry out of the ring, sending things to the floor of Texas Stadium. Race set up for a pile driver, but was countered by Von Erich, giving Race a backdrop on the AstroTurf. Getting things back in the ring, Race successfully delivered a pile driver, but only got a count of 1 before sending things back outside the ring, where they got brutal. Race slammed Kerry's head into the announcer's setup, drawing blood from Von Erich's head. Race continued the attack outside the ring, slamming Kerry's head into the ring post before giving him a suplex on the turf. Kerry finally turned the table, slamming Race into the ring post and drawing blood from the former champion. The action returned to the ring, but both men ended up on the field again when Kerry tried to body slam Race and they toppled over the top rope. As they re-entered the ring, Race climbed to the top rope to try a crossbody on Von Erich, but Kerry used the momentum to roll over and pin Race to win the match. The Von Erich victory set up shots at Ric Flair in the world title for 3 matches later in the year. Kerry did not come away with the belt in August or October, leading to a no disqualification steel cage match at the 1982 Christmas Star Wars at Reunion Arena in Dallas. Every world-class fan knows the story, and we've covered it various different ways in other world-class bios, but just to give a synopsis. Michael Hayes had come into the territory in October as a babyface, soon followed by his fabulous Freebird partners Terry Gordy and Buddy Roberts. They were presented to fans as friends of David from Florida. The Freebirds proved to be a popular addition to the territory, making Michael Hayes a lock to win a fan vote to see who would be the special referee for the world title match between Flair and Kerry. Also at Christmas Star Wars, the Freebirds were scheduled to face Mike Sharp, Ben Sharp, and Tom Steele in a tournament final to crown new World Six-Man Tag Team Champions. When the night finally came, Buddy Roberts was stranded in Denver due to bad weather and was not able to make the flight to Dallas for the match that night, but Hayes and Gordy were prepared to go on with the match with a 2-on-3 disadvantage. However, David Von Erich, who had already defended his Texas Heavyweight Championship earlier in the night, came to the ring and volunteered to take Roberts' place for the match. Not only did David help the Freebirds win the 6-man title, he scored the winning pinfall. After the match, David announced he would relinquish his third of the title to Roberts, saying he knew the Freebirds would do the same for him and his brothers. The main event of the night followed soon thereafter. Ric Flair defended the NWA World Championship against Kerry Von Erich in a cage with noted world-class referee David Manning officiating and Michael Hayes in the ring as a special second referee. Terry Gordy also stood at ringside as the keeper of the key. To somewhat cut to the chase, more than 20 minutes into the match, as Hayes was trying to get Flair to break, Flair shoved Hayes back. Hayes responded by punching Flair, almost knocking him unconscious. Hayes tried to get Von Erich to pin Flair, but seeing what Hayes had done, Kerry refused to take the win. This came after other conflicts Hayes had had with both Kerry and Manning in the match. With Gordy outside the ring urging Hayes to leave, Hayes started out of the cage but was stopped by Von Erich. Flair then came up behind Kerry and hit him in the back with a knee, pushing him into Hayes, who was standing in the open cage door, and fell to the Reunion Arena floor. As Kerry looked out to check on Hayes,
"Oh, Kerry Von Erich hit him in the head with a cage door!"
It was the beginning of the Von Erichs versus Freebirds feud that would highlight the landscape of world-class wrestling for the better part of the next 6 years, with the world-class 6-man tag team championship at the center of it all. Obviously, all of the Von Erichs and Freebirds were involved, but particular attention was drawn to Kerry and Freebirds' mouthpiece, Michael Hayes. In the early stages of the war against the Freebirds, Kerry also made strides in his status within the NWA, defeating Harley Race for the Missouri Heavyweight Championship on June 21, 1983 in St. Louis. Kerry defended the belt against the likes of Greg Valentine and Bob Orton Jr., and even on a tour of Japan against Takashi Ishikawa and Generico Tenryu, before dropping the belt to Jerry Blackwell in April. Appearing regularly in both World Class and NWA St. Louis through the early part of 1983 also led to more world title matches against Ric Flair, but it was still Brother David that had the inside track on a world title run. In June 1983, Harley Race regained the NWA World Championship from Flair as the alliance was weighing its options on who would carry the torch from there. It has been said it was actually David that was supposed to beat Race for the title later in the year, but in the meantime, the Von Erichs and Freebirds war raged on. A series of strap matches, lumberjack matches, and Texas death matches between various combinations of the Von Erichs and Freebirds got some extra flavor when Kerry tagged with Von Erich ally Bruiser Brody to defeat Michael Hayes and Terry Gordy in June 1983 for the American Tag Team Championship. That was followed by Kerry, Kevin, and David finally dethroning the Freebirds and winning the World Six-Man Tag Team Championship at the Independence Day Star Wars card in Fort Worth. Mixed in with the Von Erich Freebird feud and the world title situation was World Class itself exploding in popularity. Jim Garvin, Iceman King Parsons, Chris Adams, Skandar Akbar with Kamala, and many others came into the territory to give a wave of new baby faces and heels just as the television production was taking off. Suddenly, Dallas was the hottest territory in the country, and Kerry was its biggest star. With World Class at what might have been its most popular, fans were delighted when news came that another Von Erich was preparing to make his debut. Mike Von Erich was set to appear in his first match later in the year, setting up a situation that would actually put the Von Erich Freebird feud on something of a pause. During an interview with Mark Lawrence in Fort Worth, Kerry presented Mike with a ring jacket to wear in his debut. Kerry then left Mike alone with Lawrence in the ring, but it wasn't long before Michael Hayes came from the back to confront the young Von Erich face to face. Hayes snatched the jacket from Mike's hand and ripped it to shreds, leading to Mike jumping on Hayes. The bigger, more experienced Hayes quickly gained the upper hand and tossed Mike out of the ring, but Kerry returned to battle Hayes while trying to keep Mike out of harm's way. As Kerry put Hayes down, an interfering Buddy Roberts was disposed of by Mike. Later in the night, all three Freebirds returned to the ring for their interview time, with Hayes vowing to run Kerry out of Texas. This led to a loser leaves town match at the 1983 Thanksgiving Star Wars at Reunion Arena in Dallas, with Kerry defeating Hayes in just under 10 minutes. Per the stipulation of the match, Hayes would not be allowed to wrestle in Texas for 1 year. That same night, Mike Von Erich made his career debut with a victory over Skandar Akbar, while Kevin defeated Terry Gordy and David defended the Texas Heavyweight Championship against Kamala. Meanwhile, 1,100 miles away, Ric Flair defeated Harley Race to regain the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. 8 days later, Kerry, Kevin, and David regained the World Six-Man Tag Team Championship from the Freebirds, with now two-time World Champion Ric Flair standing in for Hayes. The remaining Freebirds demanded a loser leaves town tag team match against Kevin and Mike Von Erich. They would get their wish, with the loser of the fall being forced to leave Texas for 1 year, and Kevin pinning Gordy to send him packing. While two-thirds of the Freebirds were away, the focus shifted to the NWA World Championship. While Kerry was still considered a top contender to the fans, it was David that was being set up to take the title from Ric Flair. Mike Von Erich faced Flair in a 10-minute match in January, with the stipulation that if Mike defeated Flair or held him to a time-limit draw, David would get a match for the world title with the disqualification rule waived, meaning if Flair got himself disqualified, he would lose the belt. Mike did hold Flair to that draw, giving David his match. It would never happen. While on tour in Japan, David passed away on February 10, 1984, of acute enteritis. The sudden death shocked the wrestling world and left the Von Erichs and their fans devastated. Many people close to the family believe Kerry may have been hit hardest of all. Fans were told the NWA would accept either Kevin or Kerry as a substitute for David in the match against Flair, and by virtue of a coin flip, Kerry would take David's place in the match. On May 6, 1984, at what was now known as the David Von Erich Memorial Parade of Champions at Texas Stadium, Kerry faced off against NWA World Champion Ric Flair. Flair, who was known to get himself disqualified to lose the match but keep his belt, would be forced to surrender the title if he was disqualified in this match. The match itself was a typical Flair versus Kerry match, with Kerry displaying feats of strength and agility to counter the more experienced champion. Flair ran through his usual shtick on both offense and defense, and of course Kerry made use of the Iron Claw. In 18 minutes and 35 seconds, Kerry Von Erich pinned Ric Flair using a backslide to become the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, as more than 30,000 fans erupted. At the time, Kerry was the youngest NWA World Champion in history. A lot of people criticize the finish of this match, but the fact of the matter is the match didn't need a complex finish to get over. The match was over before the ring was even set up. After years of falling short, Von Erich was finally the world champion, a victory to honor David, who was gone too soon. Despite recent claims to the contrary, Kerry's world title reign went off without a hitch. His first defense came just 24 hours later in Fort Worth, a victory over Freebird Terry Gordy. Kerry made a few defenses in Texas, including one against Flair in San Antonio, before heading to Florida. In the Sunshine State, Kerry had several defenses against the likes of Mike Rotundo, Billy Graham, and Ron Bass. On May 22nd, Kerry defended successfully against Jumbo Tsuruta in Tokyo, Japan, before facing off against Flair 2 nights later in Yokosuka, Japan, where he dropped the belt back to the former champion. 18 days, and it was over. Again, despite recent claims, the 18-day title reign was agreed upon before Kerry ever got the belt, and was actually longer than the NWA wanted to allow. but Fritz Von Erich was able to convince them to raise it. What nobody knew at the time is Kerry Von Erich would be the last NWA World Champion to come out of the territories. By the middle of June, Kerry was back on a regular schedule in World Class and primarily concentrating on the feud with the Freebirds over the six-man title, with younger brother Mike now filling that third spot. Gordy and Hayes had been allowed to return to World Class earlier in the year, but by the end of summer, the Freebirds were headed to the WWF. After what was seemingly a feud-ending loser leaves town steel cage match at the Labor Day Star Wars card in Fort Worth that sent the Freebirds packing again, the Von Erichs needed a new team of villains. That came almost immediately when Von Erich ally Chris Adams turned on Kevin during a tag match against Jake Roberts and Gino Hernandez, and ended up aligning with Roberts and Hernandez. Kerry's professional and personal life had become an odd mix of bliss and turmoil that followed him the rest of his life. While his world title reign was a short one, he was one of the few pro wrestlers working at the time that could carry the label former world champion. And he was still the top babyface in one of the most popular territories in the country. Away from the ring, he had married his wife Kathy in 1983, and by September 1984, they had their first daughter, Holly. But there was more going on with Kerry not everybody saw on the surface. In trying to jockey for position for the world title, it was like a friendly competition between he and David, while Kevin was never really interested because he didn't want to constantly travel. With David gone, Kerry not only lost a brother, but lost a person helping carry the burden of being a representative of the territory. People close to Kerry say it was after David died that the drug problems surrounding Kerry started to get out of hand. Of course, for the great majority of world-class fans, Kerry was never anything but the smiling superstar with the million-dollar body. In the ring, the Von Erichs feud with Chris Adams, Gino Hernandez, and Jake Roberts went from 0 to 100. Adams, Hernandez, and Roberts took the World Six-Man Tag Championship from Kerry, Mike, and Bobby Fulton, filling in for an injured Kevin at the Cotton Bowl Extravaganza on October 27, 1984. 2 days later, Kerry regained the American Heavyweight Championship by defeating Hernandez in Fort Worth. Meanwhile, the world title chances for Kerry were still plentiful, as Flair versus Kerry became a big draw even in other territories. Between the 1st of November and the end of May, Kerry faced Flair 13 times with the world title on the line, not just in Dallas-Fort Worth, but in San Antonio, Austin, Oklahoma City, St. Louis, Honolulu, Miami Beach, and even Jackson, Mississippi, among other locations. It seemed like fans everywhere wanted to see if Kerry could do it again, but he never came away with the belt. In World Class, the six-man title would be de-emphasized when Jake Roberts left the territory, but the feud with Chris Adams and Gino Hernandez continued, mostly centering on the dynamic duo facing Kerry and Kevin. Kerry also feuded with One Man Gang, leading to a trend of taking hair in 1985. At the second David Von Erich Memorial Parade of Champions, it was brother Kevin facing Flair for the world title, while Kerry faced One Man Gang. If Kerry lost, One Man Gang would get a match with Fritz Von Erich. If Gang lost the match, Fritz would get to shave Gary Hart's head. Fritz would be handcuffed to Gary Hart at ringside to prevent Hart from interfering. The 8-minute and 15-second match ended when Fritz interfered and tripped up Gang, allowing Kerry to pin him. Other wrestlers came from the back to help as One Man Gang was then handcuffed to the turnbuckle, and Hart's head was shaved in the middle of the ring, giving him the look he carried the rest of his life. Also on that card, the Von Erichs found themselves in the unusual position of teaming with the Freebirds, who were back in the territory in something of a tweener role. They faced Rip Oliver, Steve Williams, Kamala, One Man Gang, Chris Adams, and Gino Hernandez in a 2-ring tag match, with the winning team splitting $100,000 and the winner of the pinfall getting a new car. Kevin would pin Williams to win the car, which was then bashed by Adams and Hernandez using Gang's chain and throwing gas on the fire of the Von Erich feud with the dynamic duo. Kerry and Kevin were looking to take the American Tag Team Championship from Adams and Hernandez, but the duo refused to sign a contract against the brothers, instead choosing to take on an unknown team called the Cosmic Cowboys, which turned out to be Kerry and Kevin wearing masks. At this time, Adams and Hernandez had also been making a habit of snipping some of the hair of every opponent, It all led to one of the more memorable matches in world-class history at the Cotton Bowl extravaganza in October. Near the end of what was obviously a very physical no disqualification match, while Kevin had been tossed outside the ring, Gino held Kerry to allow Adams to throw powder in Kerry's eyes. Kevin was able to return in time to allow Kerry to stay in the corner and have the powder wiped from his eyes. When Adams held Kevin so Hernandez could use the powder again, Kevin managed to escape, and the powder went into Adams' eyes. He was then rolled up by Kerry, who got the 3 count for the win. Hernandez was held back while a line of other wrestlers who had their hair snipped by Adams and Hernandez took a turn taking some of Adams' hair before Kerry and Kevin shaved the Englishman's head. When it was Gino's turn, he managed to escape, but was tackled by a barely 16-year-old Kerry Von Erich at ringside. With both Adams and Hernandez bald, they temporarily wore masks to cover their heads. Though 1985 brought memorable moments for Kerry, it also brought more tragic situations and change. In August, Kerry's brother Mike contracted toxic shock syndrome after shoulder surgery and was on the edge of death, but against all odds, managed to pull through. By the time the Cotton Bowl extravaganza came around, Mike was in attendance, but it would be months before he returned to the ring. That same day, Kevin Vaughn made his first appearance as Lance Von Erich, a kayfabe cousin to the Von Erich brothers. In fact, it was Lance that helped wipe the powder from Kerry's eyes during the match against Adams and Hernandez. Ironically, Lance would be the last person using the name Von Erich to get a shot at Ric Flair in the NWA World Championship out of World Class. The National Wrestling Alliance had essentially been taken over by Jim Crockett Jr., who announced the world champion would no longer be a traveling champion. All matches for the NWA World title would take place in Jim Crockett Promotions. It was not likely that Kerry, or any other Von Erich for that matter, would get another run with the NWA World Championship, but losing the champion coming to town meant they lost that draw for big cards. With their hand being forced, Fritz and World Class decided to take a leap of faith. In February 1986, World Class officially left the NWA and rebranded as their own alliance, the World Class Wrestling Association. The American Heavyweight Champion, who at that time was Rick Rude, was now recognized as the WCWA World Heavyweight Champion by the organization. For the most part, it was business as usual for fans in and around Dallas, but World Class would slowly start to lose its national appeal. Kerry was no longer traveling to other territories to face Flair for the world title, but in a horrible flash, that was all secondary. On June 4, 1986, just days after returning from a tour of Japan and a little more than a month before his second child Lacey was born, Kerry was involved in a horrific motorcycle accident. Riding at a high speed and wearing only gym shorts, Kerry hit the back of a police car, severely injuring his foot. World-class referee Rick Hazard, who was one of the first to arrive at the hospital with Kerry, was quoted as saying, "It looks like an alligator chewed on it." Doctors worked for hours, but they managed to reconstruct and save Kerry's foot. Unfortunately, it wouldn't last. There are various stories on exactly what happened, but Kerry did try to come back to the ring too soon. In February, just 8 months after almost losing his foot, Kerry had 2 matches against real-life childhood friend Brian Adias, who, in storyline, turned on the Von Erichs. A match in Fort Worth went well enough, but in their second encounter in Dallas 4 days later, Kerry re-injured his damaged foot. Apparently, doctors were able to once again save the foot, but Kerry tried to walk on it too soon. This time there was no other choice but to amputate his foot. Just a few weeks after Kerry lost his foot, another tragedy hit the family. Suffering both physically and mentally after his near-death experience the previous year, Mike Von Erich took his own life on April 12, 1987. Kerry would be out of action another 8 months, and just days before Mike's death, the arrangement with Lance Von Erich was dissolved. That left Kevin as the only Von Erich still active in the territory. For many fans, Mike's death was one too many tragedies, and in hindsight, it may have been something of a breaking point for both Kevin and Fritz as well. But like a phoenix rising from the ashes, Kerry was not done yet. Unknown to fans and even most people in the business, Kerry Von Erich was fitted with a prosthetic foot. Somehow, just 8 months after his match with Brian Adias in Dallas, Kerry returned to the ring for a spot show in Commerce, Texas, defeating Al Perez on October 29, 1987. Less than a month later, Kerry and Kevin tagged together to defeat Brian Adias and Frankie Lancaster for the WCWA World Tag Team Championship, and Kerry even went on a week-long tour of Japan. With Kerry's return, fans slowly started to come back, but a questionable decision by Fritz would change the course of the company. At the 1987 Christmas Star Wars card, Kerry was set to face WCWA World Champion Al Perez in a steel cage match for the title. Earlier in the night, Kevin Von Erich, Chris Adams, and Steve Simpson defeated a revamped version of the Freebirds with Terry Gordy, Buddy Roberts, and Iceman King Parsons for the World Six-Man Tag Team Championship. For the world title match, Perez manager Gary Hart would be handcuffed to Fritz inside the cage but outside the ring. After the wrestler introductions, Terry Gordy suddenly appeared in the ring and grabbed the mic to tell everyone he believed it should be him getting the world title shot. Gordy then addressed Kerry, telling him Kerry couldn't even ride a motorcycle, so he shouldn't be getting a match for the title. Kerry and Gordy began to trade blows when Buddy Roberts hit the ring, but was quickly cut off by Fritz. As Gordy kept Kerry in one corner and Gary Hart held Al Perez back in another, Iceman Parsons and Freebird associate the Angel of Death jumped Fritz and handcuffed him to the ropes, whipping him with a belt, and beating and choking him with Parsons' cane. The Freebirds finally left as Kevin hit the ring to help. At first, it seemed Fritz was all right, leaving the ring with a little help from Kerry and Kevin. Suddenly, Fritz fell to the ground. With announcer Mark Lawrence asking the crowd to give them room, paramedics came in and carried Fritz out on a stretcher. Fans were told Fritz was taken to Baylor Hospital, and the only word was that it was too close to call. It came to be known as the Fritz Von Erich heart attack angle, despite the fact that it was never once said that Fritz had a heart attack. The angle was a group of villains attacking a beloved old man, with Fritz hoping to spark the same interest the cage door did 5 years earlier. Under better circumstances, the angle probably would have been fine, but with all of the tragic events that had happened over the last 3.5 years, not to mention coming just 8 months after Mike's death, the angle left a bad taste in the mouth of a lot of people. Shortly after Christmas Star Wars, Fritz officially sold World Class to Kerry and Kevin, along with former Booker and Wild West Wrestling owner Ken Mantell. Kevin had basically moved into semi-retirement by this time, but Kerry would continue as the top in-ring star in World Class. On March 6, 1988, at the Sportatorium, the top star took the organization's top title. Kerry defeated Al Perez for the WCWA World Championship. With Kerry back and sitting on top, crowds were starting to grow again, but it was still rough going. The Freebird feud was failing to capture the appeal it had, even when Michael Hayes returned as a babyface to align with the Von Erichs and battle his former Freebird brothers. Behind the scenes, Kerry and Kevin were quickly discovering being the boss wasn't all it was cracked up to be. Signs that the days of World Class rolling to roost in Dallas began to make themselves evident. Kerry briefly dropped the world title to Iceman Parsons, but regained it at what would be the final Memorial Parade of Champions in May, which only drew about 7,000 people. During this time, World Class and the Memphis-based CWA began a working relationship, with wrestlers from both companies appearing in the other. The World Six-Man Tag Team Championship was officially deactivated after Kerry, Kevin, and former Freebird Michael Hayes won the title from Buddy Roberts, Iceman Parsons, and Kamala, who was standing in for an absent Terry Gordy. Kerry faced new AWA World Champion Jerry Lawler in a short series of matches for the AWA title, but Kerry failed to win the belt each time. Moving into a series of unification matches with both the AWA and WCWA world titles on the line led to Super Clash 3, the first AWA pay-per-view held in Chicago on December 13, 1988. And yes, this was the infamous match where Kerry accidentally cut his own arm with a razor blade before the match started. Near the end of the match, Lawler seemingly pulled a foreign object from his trunks and busted Von Erich's head open. Continuing to attack Kerry, Lawler came from the ropes, but jumped into a Von Erich iron claw in the stomach, which Kerry would later move to Lawler's head. Referee Marty Miller was checking Lawler, but was giving as much attention to Von Erich's head, which was bleeding profusely. Lawler would manage to come back and get the upper hand, again taking the object from his trunks and striking Kerry in the head as WCWA official Frank Dusek protested from ringside. Kerry would manage to come back, but eventually both men fell to the mat exhausted, with Miller still concerned with Kerry's head. Kerry reapplied the iron claw and seemed to almost have Lawler out when Miller suddenly called for the bell. Miller said Kerry could not continue because of the severe bleeding and awarded the match and both belts to Lawler. The chance of bull feces from the crowd was a clear sign of what fans thought of the ending. Super Clash 3 was a financial disaster, prompting AWA owner Vern Gagne not to pay many of the wrestlers the agreed amount due to low buy rates. For Kerry, it was the first clear sign the Von Erichs were no longer in control. Kevin and Kerry had officially sold the organization to Jerry Jarrett, though they did retain rights to the world-class name. In a rematch in Dallas 3 days later, Lawler defeated Kerry to remove any doubt over who held the Unified Championship. Von Erich and Lawler continued to feud over the WCWA title into 1989, but eventually the merger with the CWA was complete, and Lawler was recognized as the USWA World Champion. Through the summer of 1989, cards in Dallas still carried the WCW name, and Kerry did briefly hold the WCWA World Tag Team Championship with Jeff Jarrett, but it was becoming clear that most of the world-class stars, including Kevin and Kerry, were being pushed to the side in favor of other talent. By the end of summer, the world-class name was gone, and the organization was officially known as the United States Wrestling Association. Though things weren't what they used to be, Kerry did get the chance to work with the youngest Von Erich brother as Chris tried to get his wrestling career started. Kerry also feuded with Matt Bourne over the Texas Heavyweight Championship. By the middle of summer 1990, both Kevin and Kerry left the USWA. Kevin wanted to revive World Class in Dallas, but Kerry decided to look north to the World Wrestling Federation. Vince McMahon had wanted Kerry in the WWF for a long time, or at least did years before Kerry finally went to New York. It has been said Kerry was actually McMahon's first choice for the face of the company in the early 1980s, even over Hulk Hogan. World-class fans that watched both may have noticed the WWF television production and several storylines borrowed heavily from World Class, and Vince even approached them about a merger years earlier, but that never panned out. Now 30 years old and dealing with wrestling with a prosthetic foot, the WWF was a different world for Kerry, and McMahon made sure everything felt every ounce of difference. At first, Kerry was not even known as Kerry Von Erich, but as the Texas Tornado, though eventually the WWF did start identifying him as the Texas Tornado Kerry Von Erich. Kerry would still use the Iron Claw, but it was more of a setup for the discus punch, which was now known as the Tornado Punch. Kerry was still a big star and given a nice push, but he was no longer the star of the organization. That may have been to some benefit, as he was still somewhat limited because of his foot. Unlike many other wrestlers from the territories who hit the house show circuit after coming to the WWF, Kerry made his debut on an episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, defeating Buddy Rose in just over 3 minutes. That same night, for a taping of WWF Superstars, the newly named Texas Tornado defeated Iron Mike Sharp in about 90 seconds. Wasting no time, Kerry immediately set his sights on the Intercontinental Champion Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig, leading into a series of tag team matches as Kerry teamed with Ultimate Warrior against Hennig and Rick Rude. Kerry and Warrior won every match in the series at TV tapings and house shows leading up to SummerSlam 1990 in Philadelphia, where the Tornado defeated Perfect to take the Intercontinental Championship, the first and only title Kerry won in the WWF. Kerry would defend the Intercontinental Championship countless times in rematches against Hennig, but it was becoming clear Vince McMahon was already feeling some buyer's remorse. Kerry still looked great in the ring and was still incredibly popular, but his reliance on painkillers he took for his foot, along with other substance abuse issues, were starting to wear thin with McMahon. Fearing Kerry might leave unannounced, McMahon had Von Erich drop the Intercontinental title back to Hennig in November 1990, though Kerry appeared as champion in a series of matches with Roddy Piper as a special referee over the next month. Kerry continued to rack up wins through 1991 over the likes of Ted DiBiase, Dino Bravo, and the Berserker, but it never led to much. Then, in September, what might have been the biggest blow yet to Kerry happened back home in Texas. Chris Von Erich, having dealt with a lifetime of health problems and unable to have the career his brothers had, took his own life on September 12, 1991. Many people closest to the family have said Kerry was closest to Chris and felt very protective over the youngest brother. Now traveling on the other side of the country, Kerry wasn't home for Chris at his lowest point. It might have been the tipping point for Kerry. In the ring, for the first time in his career, Kerry was just lingering in the mid-card, having minor feuds and never finding himself in title matches. That started to change for the worse in 1992, when Kerry often found himself on the losing end of a series of matches against Rick Martel and jobbing for the likes of Skinner and Nails. Kerry had his final WWF match on July 10, 1992, a loss to Kamala in Hershey, Pennsylvania. After a quick trip to Japan and an appearance for New England Wrestling Federation, Kerry returned home to Texas. Kevin's attempt to revive World Class didn't last. However, there was a new organization called the Global Wrestling Federation that featured some familiar faces like Chris Adams and Skandar Akbar. Kerry made his first appearance in the GWF on November 27, 1992, at the Sportatorium against Black Bart, with the match ending in a double countout. Kerry immediately entered into a feud against Bart, and even made an appearance at ECW Battle of the Belts against Salvatore Valomo in Philadelphia, with fans not knowing they were seeing him for the last time. Kerry had his final recorded match on February 12, 1993 at the Sportatorium in Dallas, a tag team match where he teamed with Chris Adams and took the loss against Black Bart and Johnny Mantell. Drugs were a part of life in pro wrestling in the 1980s, and Kerry Von Erich was far from the only wrestler to have his battles with them. But for Kerry, it overtook him. Between the pain of his foot, the mental anguish of the tragedies that surrounded his family, the pressure of being the center of his father's promotion at such a young age, and something of a fall from grace, Kerry's battle with drugs almost seemed unwinnable. After a drug arrest that led to probation, Kerry was arrested again at the airport. Not only was it a second drug charge, but this time he was in violation of his probation. There was a high probability he was facing time in prison. Arriving at his father's ranch just 15 days after his 33rd birthday and just 8 days after the 9th anniversary of Brother David's death, Kerry took a pistol he had given his father for Christmas and drove out to the backside of the land. Firing a single shot into his heart, Kerry took his own life on February 18, 1993. If you step back and take a look at Kerry Von Erich's life in wrestling, it's almost like looking at a double exposure. In Texas, he was a wrestling god, causing near riots when he made a public appearance. But it always seemed like he was stopped just short of reaching a national summit. Kerry almost got to go to the Olympics, but that was taken away. He held the most prestigious title in pro wrestling, but only for 18 days, and territories like Georgia and Mid-Atlantic didn't tell their audience until after he lost it back. Once in the WWF, at the time they had gone national, he was stuck in the mid-card. Kerry's only project away from wrestling was a small part in the 1990 comedy Problem Child. He was up for a part as Ivan Drago in Rocky IV, but that part went to Dolph Lundgren. Kerry's career is loaded with what could have been, while also being enormously successful. Even how people remember Kerry depends on who you ask. Many wrestlers remember him as being a drug addict, while others simply label him as unreliable. Lance Von Erich and Ultimate Warrior remembered having a connection with Kerry through a dedication to working out, while others like Bret Bart and Larry Zbyszko remember a kind and friendly man who waded through a lot of tragedy in his life. His family remembers a fun father who tried to lighten any heavy situation with a joke, even if it was something about his prosthetic foot. Fans, well, to some extent, they remember all of it. But the people who were there to see the peak of world class still remember that wrestling god with the $1 million body. Kerry Von Erich did leave a lasting legacy, starting with his daughters. Holly stayed out of the spotlight for years, but more recently has done interviews and a podcast with Kevin's daughter, Kristen. Of course, Lacey went on to have a wrestling career of her own, holding both the Windy City Pro Wrestling Women's Championship and the TNA Knockouts Tag Team Championship as part of the Beautiful People. I've determined that no matter how I end this, it doesn't seem like enough. Unless you were there, in Texas, as a fan of world class, it's hard to put into words just how popular Kerry was and how much he meant to fans. He was a modern-day warrior, the cream of the crop in a promotion that was here for a fleeting moment, but for fans it seems like it went on for decades. Kerry was gone too soon, but in many ways he lives on.
Kerry rolls over. Kerry Von Erich is the world champion again. Kerry Von Erich reigns.
The winner in 16 minutes and 12 seconds, and still the world heavyweight champion, Kerry Von Erich.
Gordy from the ropes of this place. Kerry took him right on over. And Kerry Von Erich reigns as the world heavyweight champion here in Fort Worth tonight. And Freebird Terry Gordy does not know what happened.